Fletcher, and today we are in the home of Viola and Walter Armijo, and we're going to be discussing with them the history of Palomas Creek and the early history of the settlers of this area. Welcome, Walter, and welcome, Viola.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to start this. As I said, this is part of the Centennial celebration, and it will be video streamed off of Campo Espinoso and also on TV for TRC off our cable system. So tell us initially, how did your families arrive?
Well, actually, my parents, Viola's parents were both born here. Well, my mother was born in North Springs, New Mexico. My dad was actually born here in Las Palomas. And his dad was also born in Las Palomas. So it goes, history of my dad and Viola's dad goes back to about the 1800s. And then from there, we got involved, or matter of fact, he got involved with my uncle, which is Don Montoya, and he's the one founder of this place we're living in right here. He bought that in 1940. But his history goes back to the Las Palomas, original town side of Las Palomas, which is about a mile and a half east of here. But as far as the history of los Armijos and los Montoyas, I can start with my grandfather, which is Esquipula Armijo. And he homesteaded here. It was probably about the 1800s, and sorry about that. For 4-legged kids. Lost my train of thought. And he had a farm up the canyon here, about 8 miles. And so he did all his farming with mostly horses, team of horses, and all animal drawn equipment. And then my dad came around, and then he married my mother, which she was, like I said, she was born in California, North Springs, New Mexico. And then from here, they went to California, and I was born in Los Angeles, California in 1945. Moved back over here in 1940, 45 and a half. At the time, we lived with my uncle and aunt, I lived with my uncle and aunt, was Don and Rita Montoya, which Don and Rita Montoya were actually roots of here. Don Montoya, my uncle, he was a school teacher for many years. He taught in Monticello, New Mexico. He also taught up here at the local school, which, in fact, I went to school there from I was 4 years old to the 5th grade. And then my aunt, her brothers and sisters were actually born here in Las Palomas. They have farms up the canyon here. Back in the 1940s, when the level of the lake rose, that's when all the town of Las Palomas started to dilapidate and fall apart, and they start moving around. Well, my uncle and aunt during the 40s, they bought, which was the Maxwell store, which Bill Maxwell was one of the mercantile down in Las Palomas at the old town site. They sold it to him. They in turn moved it over here in the 40s, about 1942 to 43, and they started what they call the Las Palomas Country Store. And my uncle taught school here at the local school, and my aunt was a homemaker. From there, my uncle went ahead and developed the farm, and had it cleared up and leveled with mud heavy. But anyways, going back to the town of Palomas, back then, as far as I can recall, what I was told, there was 2 dance halls and 2 bars, and there was a population of around between 2,000 and 2,500 people. There's an old church that the remnants of the church is still there, which in fact this one that we have over here is a church that they moved from down there up here, because my uncle went ahead and deeded, or not deeded, but gave the Archdiocese some property to have this church built. All the statues in that church, all original statues from here. They date back quite a few years.
Now the bell that was in the church,
It's still here.
you have it in the church over here now.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a picture of that church that was probably taken in the late 30s when the lake was filling up. My mother, because that church down there was adobe,
Yeah.
and you could see the water eating away at it, and we do have a picture of that.
That's
It'll be
exactly
interesting.
what happened.
Yeah, the original, the bell and everything's on this church here. Now, I have the original bell from the school, the original school.
Cool.
And I've got that, it's a perfect shape. One of these days I want to mount it back up here.
Now, Walter, does that bell that you have from the school, does it have the name of the school on the side? When Jay and I were up in Hillsboro, we found the bell from the Hillsboro school, and it has the name of the school on the side, which was interesting that they would have. So we were hoping that maybe every little school that had a bell would have that, identify it with the name of the area that it would have run.
Was it engraved on there, or what was it?
No, it was
Cast it?
raised. It was raised like it was part of the handle.
No.
It had Hillsboro written on it.
You know what, to be honest with you, I haven't even paid that much attention. I know it's got the name of the bell, or the maker.
One side had the name of the maker of the bell, right, Jay? And then the second side had the name of the school, which I was so excited about because, you know, we've been looking for the array bell that went missing in the late 70s or early 80s. And so I was hoping that all the bells were ID'd so there would be a way to be able to find, you know.
Yeah, that's, I don't know, I can look and see.
We can look at that.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting. So, well, and so for the audience, explain where Horse Springs, New Mexico is.
Horse Springs, New Mexico is between Magdalena and Daddle. It was a little old, what was it, cattle growing area. My mother was born over there, my sister was born in Horse Springs. I think, Lee, right now, I think there's one building there.
Yeah, it was
Nothing.
Not very much there, but it's just a real small, tiny little town. Like I said, I don't know that much history about that area up there. And,
But it's still on the map, and it
Yes,
is going
yes.
to Reserve. I think you go through
Yes.
Horse Springs, and then you go on to
there's a little sign that
Cruzville
says
and
Horse Springs, New Mexico, yes.
Comado in that area.
Oh, yes, it's
Yeah.
in Catherine County.
So-
Catherine Scuttle.
So your family goes easily back into the 1850s in this area?
At least, not probably earlier.
If not earlier. His cousin Elias Armijo did a genealogy chart, and he searched it back to the
Like the
1600s, and they came from Spain, and this was the Armijo family, and from there they came through. So I don't really know. He never got to write the book because he died, but and then it all came into this area here. But I'm sure that it was early 18 or even 1700s that they came here. I would think.
Yeah, the history that I'm talking about is history that I've heard my uncle and my aunt speak about that.
What are some of those stories that passed down through your family?
Well, for example, and I remember this when I was a kid, for example, that church, it's painted with whitewash. In the whitewash, there's a mine up there in Cabal Mountains that you can get it. And my grandfather and I, and one of my cousins, we went up there on a horse and a buggy, and we went to this particular mine. And to this day, I don't know where it's at. But anyway, I remember we cut these little chunks of line, and that's what he used to make his whitewash out of. And I remember crossing the river, with about 3 foot of water with an old 2 horses back. They used to call them Ben and Jack. They were like white horse, real pretty horses. And then I used to go with my grandfather over the cross river to bring wood, just to cut it with an axe. But as far as that's the only thing that I could actually recall when I was a kid. That's what sticks in my mind most of those 2 trips.
And I remember Rita, that was his aunt, who was married to Don Montoya, just her reminiscing of them going to dances in Cuchillo on board, whatever you call them.
Buckboards?
Buckboards, yeah. And they would take the kids, and the kids would all lay them down under the benches to sleep while they danced. And they would, eat or whatever and spend the night, because of course it would take a long time from here to Cuchillo on a buckboard.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember those stories.
Now, when when they were talking about that, did you ever remember any stories about La Llorona when you lived
Yes,
close?
yes.
Tell us about.
She used to talk about La Llorona, and it was over in the flats. And not only La Llorona, but a light.
The light, the
A light
Palomas
that would
lights.
follow, the Palomas lights, right, that would follow the cars or whatever. She did use, and she saw them. She said that she did see them. And there was also, she would talk about, I guess you would call them witches, because she remembers at one time that there was this lady, I don't remember what her name was, but somebody was sick, and this lady had brought him some food, and they had left it on, you know, one of those things like from the stove, and when they went back in the evening, it was full of worms, the food was. And I remember her talking about that. So I don't know whether, you know, but this is what she remembered.
Yeah, I remember when they first were talking about the lights in the Lloronas, we were still in high school, and we used to take the girlfriends over there to see if we could find the lights, but we never did find any lights, you know. And it just, I guess the scenario was just to take the girls out to see the lights.
It was kind of like snipe hunting, right? I remember snipe hunting in Mims's Pond and then being left.
Getting back to Las Palomas, I've got some antiques. Matter of fact, for example, this phone is right behind me here. That was one of the first telephones that was installed here in Las Palomas. It used to be in our old house. And the old houses I'm talking about, it was on the west side. And I remember that phone very vaguely because they used to. It was a party line. In order to get in the party line, you have to sit there and you ring it. And then whenever you rung, when they pick it up, everybody that had a phone picked up to see what was going on. I remember they used to get bills in this phone for, sometimes it was 10 cents a month. But this is the only phone within this whole Palomas area, so they used it pretty quite often.
And there's been several people that wanted to buy it, but it's just...
And,
So they would come to the store
Yes.
and they would use the phone
Yes.
because that was the only phone in the area.
Okay. And then this wood stove is back here. That was my aunt's cook stove that she had for many years. And we used that. We got married in 66.
64.
Let's see, 1964. and we used that at the old store. I mean, at the old house.
In fact, we got married at our little church here, and we're the only one of two. There was an older couple that got married here because we've been married 47 years, and we did get married in that church.
Incidentally, we have three grown kids, 3 boys.
That were all baptized in the church.
Yes.
Yeah, they were baptized in the church in town, though. Because we only have services once a year, and it's during the feast day. Our patron saint is San Isidro. He's the saint of farmers, and it's the closest Saturday to May the 19th. And then there's Mass, Father Council does Mass, and they process San Isidro around the area to have a good season for the farmers.
For the
You
farmers.
know, another thing that's really strange is cottonwood trees. Okay, this whole canyon of Palomas, all from the river all the way up to the springs, was completely full of cottonwood trees. In other words, it was almost like Animals Creek, and it was from it's now called the Spear Ranch, and that's probably about 10 miles west, all the way down. And then I remember when I was a kid, we had parties down there, and it was just all full of cottonwood trees, and we used to go down there in old cars and what have you. And then the Bureau of Reclamation cut all the cottonwood trees down, and that's when the sausage came around. That's why I had a problem. But if you notice now, the cottonwood trees are coming back. But I never did see all the cottonwood trees here, but I remember them down the river.
Any other stories about the, that were passed through your family? I mean, like riding, like with the buckboard, or did they ever go and take the baths in hot springs? I mean, truth or consequences as we know it in that area. And I know, Walter, you'd mentioned that even though this was called Palomas Hot Springs, the town here, that you did not know of any hot water that was here. So where did you get that name?
I don't know where they got. This was called Las Palomas, okay, which means the doves. Okay, and then apparently when like I say, when they started to develop TRC or hot springs, it was called Palomas Hot Springs. If you go back, you'll see some of the older maps that will have Palomas Hot Springs on it. That's where they got the name from out, from what I understand is from here to the springs after they started developing the springs, or once they found where the springs were. But as far as the hot springs themselves, I've never heard my parents or my uncle really talk about going up and taking the baths. You know, it's mostly, more or less just congregated here. And then when TRC became TRC, they used to go to TRC and do the shopping, but mostly the Las Cruces and what have you.
What were the roads like? And do you recall? Did your grandparents or great uncles or any of the family talk about when the road was on the other side of the mountains before they built the bridges coming up the Rio Grande, working on Old Highway 85 as we used to know it, because that was the old road that we used to use to go to cruises before they put in the interstate.
You know, I don't recall them ever talking about that.
I don't either.
I know that my grandfather used to talk about coming across the caballos on horseback and buggies. But they most of the time they were just here in the valley. They didn't go very far. And as far as the roads are concerned, this road that's right here in front of the house, that used to be just a dirt road. But as far as other history, just what I'm telling you now, that it's just been passed on. But if I'd have listened to, I had an uncle that was really, he had what was it? Your cousin, Rivera?
Oh,
Leonardo. And he was full of history.
Yeah, he was, and he passed away.
And I was trying to get his brain down on a piece of paper, but he passed away.
Viola, what do you remember about the memories from your family? And I know we have discussed that your father was buried in France and was killed during World War
II.
Talk about
in
that.
one of the beaches in Normandy. And his name was Epifanio Torres. And of course I was an infant, and he was killed in 1944, and I was born in 1943, so I really didn't know him. And then when I was 14 months old, Mom remarried this man, and his name was Vences Apodaca, who raised me as his own. And all I know is that my biological dad is buried in St. Yvonne's, France, and they didn't bring him back. And that's all I know about family, more or less, because all of the family that I really knew were the Apodacas.
So the only recollection of memories you've got is that Purple Heart that you got.
Yeah, I do have his Purple Heart and the flag that was sent by the Department of the Army, and I do have that. But other than that, there's really nothing that I know about him.
Have you done any of any stories that have passed through your family with the Torreses?
None at all, because I can tell you more about the stories from my stepfather than about my biological.
What do you recall about the stories that were passed on then through the family that you lived with, the Apodacas?
He originally was from Las Animas, which is a little further down, and that's where he was raised. But I think he was born in Cuchillo, from what I understand. My grandmother was born, that's another thing, his mother, her name was Madalena, and she was born in the little place that's underwater now with Elephant Butte.
Paraje?
Paraje. That's where she was born. And then she, I guess, married this man and settled in Animas. And that's all I know, really. I don't really know a lot about my family.
There were approximately 10 little communities that were covered when they started covering the Elephant Butte Lake. There was Zapata and Paraje and, right now they escape me, but a lot of those little tiny farming communities, and many of the families who were displaced and moved up the canyons, like whether it would have been, let's see, at Canalamosa, Cuchillo, they moved up out of the water's way, probably very similar to what happened here when they started filling Cavallo Lake in the 30s. Do you remember any discussion about was land condemned in your families when they started filling the lake?
Well, yes, back in the 40s, whenever the lake came up, the Viola Reclamation is the one that actually bought out the town of Palomas. And some of these people were actually displaced at a very, very low
Fee.
Compensation, yeah.
like the way the federal government works now. But and that's when I guess my uncle actually bought this piece of property here because of displacement from Las Palomas. I remember when we were dealing this piece of property, I was looking through the abstract and what have you. My uncle bought this 80 acres in 1940 for $488.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
and then I asked him, well, how come he didn't buy all the way down the river? I wouldn't have money. And anyway, so when they operated the store, it was a nice. They had a pretty good business. They carried dry goods, they carried canned goods, they
Gasoline.
had gasoline, they had
Clothes.
well, dry goods, and they had feed for animals. They had fresh meat. They had everything. It was just a small little country store. I mean, I recall when I was a kid, I was about 5 years old, especially on the gasoline, they used to have the hand pumps with the glass
Tops.
tops on it. You'd sit there and you fill them up, and then you grab it and flow them down. I've got pictures of that.
And there's still all of the old things in it. We have it in the store. We have more, I think, to the little museum in, what's that place that we went to, Mogollon, where they have a little museum, and we've got almost a lot more than they do in the store. We still call it the store, but there's the old cases, the candy cases, the scales, the money thing, cash register. Yeah, they're all still, we still have all of that. We have little, the bluing sticks that they use in the water. We have some of those. The long that they used to put on, that ladies used to put on their hats. In fact, we've got some boots in this one bedroom of ours. The leather boots that the women wore, real thin and pointed. We've got that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Mary Martin, who was a former teacher in in the school district, was raised and went to school at Palomas like you did, and she remembers coming off from the school and then slipping into the store when it was closed, and this was right during the Depression, so this would have probably been late 30s or early 40s, and looking at all the bolts of material that were left there. And she said she just loved looking at all the gorgeous materials, and then when recess was over, then they would sneak out and they'd run back to their classroom.
You know, very interesting that you mentioned the school. I remember when my uncle was teaching here at the school, it's called Las Palomas School. It was grades 1 through 10, I believe, at the time. And the school only had two rooms. You had the 1 through 5 on one side, and then the rest of them on the other side. There wasn't many kids. I think total population of the school there was maybe 25. But you know, I remember going on the bus, which in fact my dad owned the school bus route here for many years, and that's where I got started. But we used to go to the school, and I started going to school up there when I was about 4 years old. And one of the memories that I remember that is the water tank was about maybe 800 feet away from the school. It's all gravity, and we're talking about these other water issues. I remember that particular tank there was actually filled by a windmill into an open tank, and then from there was gravity fed. And we used to go out there periodically and drain it down and clean it, like take the dead birds out of that and what have you. But that was back in the 50s, which there was no environmentalist to worry about. And then you know, we used to have a good time. I remember we used to have a recess and we used to play cowboys and Indians. You know, we had a little forts built everything on the base of the school, and then, you know, if you want to go look for arrowheads, you just go right across the road and you can find all kinds of arrowheads. But the cemetery was right there too, so we had all three. You know, if you want to look for bones, you go to the cemetery. If you want to go look for arrowheads, you could go across the road and what have you. We have a bunch of chars too. But that was, you know, I really enjoyed going to school there, because, you know, it just sticks to me like if it was yesterday. Well, I remember one time, just to make a long story short, we had a recess, and Mrs. Cox, Anna Cox was my teacher, had this little bell, little brass bell, just to ring it. There's about 5 of us down the bottom of the hill, and we didn't hear the bell. So we were late, right? So here we go up the hill. When we got there, she broke the rulers on the back of her hand. You know, and that was the first and last time. But it was, you know, we had a really good time at that school. And then back in the 40, they consolidate these schools.
57, 59, and the late 50s.
Yeah, I
is
can
when-
see I was born in 45, so 45 and 50, yeah, and about 55, 60.
Somewhere in that area there, I know we used to, I can remember going to, in chloride and coming in off the dirt roads. The roads were a big thing. I mean, I am always interested in more history about our roads because, you know, we're a large county, but well, you know, as a contracted owner with the school system, with the bus routes, I mean, our bus routes are, we bus 40, how big is Sierra County? About 4,300 square miles, isn't it? And being a county commissioner, you represent the whole area.
County, yes.
Tell us about your very past. I mean, I know you were city manager, you've been county commissioner. Ever been on the school board?
Fortunately, no. The reason being is because I was employed by the school. To give you a little bit of history of myself, and you can do the same thing. I was born in Los Angeles, California. I moved here in 1945 and a half. And then we went to school here, graduated locally, went to college in Silver City. And then we moved, when we got married, then we went to El Paso. I went to during drafting college in El Paso. Then I came back and I worked for a heavy lumber company for about 8 years. And then I also, at the time my dad had two school bus routes here. So that prompted us to come back is because I took over one of the local school buses. And then I'd drive the school bus and then I'd go work for a heavy lumber company. And that went on for a while. And then there was an opening in the city of TRC, and that was back in '66.
As a draftsman.
And I worked there as a draftsman. And I spent 28 3/4 years with the city of TRC. And I started as a draftsman, worked myself up. In the last 4 years, well, 8 years, I was city manager, assistant manager, fill-in manager. So finally in '92, as I became full-time city manager, and I retired in '93. And I'm still a local contractor. I'm probably the oldest school bus contractor in the state. And then 5 years ago, this friend of mine, we were talking about politics, and this friend of mine says, "Why don't you run for county commissioner?" I said, "Nah." She said, "Well, I'll pay your filing fee." I said, "You go." So we did, and so I went ahead and ran unopposed and got elected, and here I am, county commissioner.
Well, you represent, what are some of the most unique things that you recollect in your history of being involved in community service? I mean, it's tough to be working, whether you work for the school system or you work for the city or you work for the county. There's always somebody out there gunning for you. I mean, because they philosophically don't align with the thinking. What do you?
Well, one thing that I would like to tell everybody is everybody ought to be involved in some kind of a government agency politically, whether it be the city, the county, or the school board. I mean, I think they would actually have a different outlook and things if they were actually involved themselves, because it's not as easy to sit and try to represent these people and do your best, because we get criticized quite a bit. Fortunately, the county of Sierra hasn't been criticized that much. Just to give you a little example, I sit on this board, which is with the New Mexico Association of Counties. I'm one of the board of directors of the New Mexico Association of Counties. There's 33 counties in the state of New Mexico. And here last, about 2.5 months ago, I was actually elected by my peers of commissioners from the whole state of New Mexico as the WR representative, which is Western Intergovernmental Relations, which I'm one of 13. I represent the state of New Mexico nationwide. And I just came back from Portland, Oregon about a couple of weeks ago, where we had our NACO, which is the National Association of the County. Was about 3,300 people there, and there's, about 3,000 people. I believe this is about 2,800 counties in the United States, somewhere in that area. But anyway, it's really interesting. You know, when I work with the city of TRC, I work with local government, all the different agencies. We work in the county government, representing county is a lot more challenging. Because the thing is, you don't only represent one group, you represent the whole area. The city of TRC is part of Sierra County, Williamsburg is part of Sierra County. So actually, even though they say this it's their own little entity, it's still within the counties. And the counties, you know, a lot of people don't give a lot of counties credit because they do a lot of things for the community. For example, we just passed, or not passed, but we endorsed a bunch of resolutions over there at the national level, anywhere from agriculture to wolves to owls to anything that's involved, actually the human race. We made recommendations to the president as far as the farm bills are concerned, which has a big impact on all the citizens. I'm not talking citizens in the United States, but all over the world. The thing is, without food, you don't live. And another thing that's becoming a big issue too is water. You know, we're really having problems with water, not only here but all over the state.
So those are those forefront issues, serving as a representative not only of the county of Sierra County, but also of the state of New Mexico. So, that's interesting. Viola, your history has been involved with nursing. I think you worked with public health.
I worked with public health for over 25 years, and then I was home 3 years, and they needed help at our church because the guy that was working there wanted to leave, and I really didn't want to go work full time, so I had told the priest at the time, who was Father Art, that I would go help. Well, here it is, 10 years later, and I'm still helping. But I enjoy my job, I enjoy the priest, and I like it.
What challenges do you see in your, talk about the work that you've been involved with the last 25 years with public health. How have you seen it change?
When I started working, we cared about the people, because the nurse was always making home visits. We would see all the children for the immunizations. We have all kinds of clinics, either for women or senior citizens or whatever. Anymore, when I retired, it was all paperwork, and they wanted to know numbers here. It really wasn't about seeing the client or the patient, whether they were having problems, health issues or whatever. It was just different. And so I decided it was time to leave, and I did. So.
I remember as a child going to the public health office, and I'm thinking that Mrs. Chavez was the public health nurse. And
I worked with her.
And Doggy Chavez.
Doggy,
and she has her family is well.
One of the pioneers as well.
As in Sierra. I think she's from what, Palomas?
She was from Animas Creek.
Animas Creek,
right.
Yeah.
In fact, she was one of the last nurses that I worked with. In fact, we retired around the same time. But at that time that I retired, I was seeing up to third generation children already. I had been, that long.
Yeah.
You know, now that you mentioned the health nurse, Mrs. McCrae, used to be a health nurse. That was one lady that I was scared stiff about. Her, Mrs. McCrae, and also the selective service. I remember what her name was.
Oh, yeah.
We used to have the draft. God, what was her name?
What was her name?
Anyway, to make a long story short, Mrs. McCrae, the nurse, I was so scared of her that I hated to go get shots. And where I really lost a lot of respect for Mrs. McCrae, in my opinion, when I was a little kid, is we had a German, a full-blooded collie, and it bit my uncle. Well, as a matter of fact, he was poisoned. Somebody's poisoned him out here in front. Anyway, when the dog was dying, I guess my uncle went and got him and kind of bit him. Well, they had to get that dog and decapitate him to send it to make sure he wouldn't have rabies. And Mrs. McCrae came down and did that. And when I was only about 3 or 4 years old. So from then, I hated Miss McCrae until I got older, then I found to figure out what she was doing.
That's pretty traumatic
But
for a
it was,
little
it
guy.
was.
Yeah, from your age,
That's,
yeah.
that's what I recall most about the health department.
Yeah, wasn't very positive.
It wasn't very good.
Any other comments you'd like to make? I mean, we've talked about La Llorona, which is interesting that you both have heard the same stories
Same
that I've
story,
heard.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're all probably, you know, somewhere, I was born 47, 44, what,
45.
45, so we're all about the same age. So it's amazing how we all have grown up with the Palomas lights and
And
La
La
Llorona.
Llorona, and, yeah.
I remember my grandfather used to talk about, they used to make homebrew. And they used to, matter of fact, they used to raise all wheat and everything else. They used to make some homebrew and wine and stuff like that. But that recipe was never passed down. So I don't know.
Well, there's some interesting recipes that still follow through the families of some of the brews that home brew that was made. It's got a pretty good kick to it.
Her uncle, her aunt up in Albuquerque, he was from Monticello, and he made some wine at home. And it had the prettiest rose color, beautiful. But it was so strong and bad that the only thing that his wife or her aunt would use was to clean the toilet. Like I said, it had a beautiful color.
Tasted terrible.
It tasted terrible.
Really bitter. Yeah, probably not enough water. Maybe.
Other than that, I'll probably remember something after you leave, but you know, we've got pictures. I've got a picture of my aunt's biological parents. Like I say, that we actually found. It's really amazing because the thing is, my aunt didn't talk too much about her parents, and they were actually from here. Matter of fact, my aunt's dad at one time was a sheriff here.
And he was an Armijo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was a sheriff here, and then my uncle's was Madame Montoya's. My uncle's father was a sheriff, and he was an Armijo.
Okay.
And well, like I say, as far as pictures, I remember my aunt at one time before we tore the old house down. She said, "There's a picture in the attic of my parents." You know, and that's okay. So when we built the house and I was tearing it down, when I come across this frame, it's a good thing it was upside down, so when I flipped it over, there's this two really young people. I mean, they're probably in their early 20s, good-looking people. That's where we came from. Anyway, so I figured this has to be her mother and father. It's the only picture in captivity. And it's still in the original frame.
You have it here?
Yes.
Can we make a picture?
Sure can.
That's
Sure can.
wonderful. I bet it's the oval.
Yes.
The oval. And wouldn't it be interesting to take that glass? I can remember as a child, you know, my mother would, because, you know, we were so poor, we would go down and, like you said, you'd hunt for rocks, you'd hunt for arrowheads, you'd hunt for purple glass. Wouldn't it be interesting to take that cover of that frame to see if it would turn purple?
Purple, yeah.
If it's before 1918 when they took the magnesium out of the glass, that was, I bet it's before that.
You know, talking about this ghost stories and what have you, and we have it's a bureau that belonged to my aunt's mother-in-law, and we've had it's got to be over 150 years old. Anyway, that particular piece of furniture was given to my aunt when she got married. Okay, and the weird thing about that thing is you pull out one of the drawers and you flip it upside down. Well, there's
A message in
a message in
Spanish.
Spanish, okay, and the message says, and it goes to my uncle. It says, "Don Anciano," says, "Cuatro pasos para la derecha," which means 4 steps to the right. Del marco, which is a mark from the door, and then it says, "Cuatro pasos para la izquierda," which means 4 steps to the left. That's tesoro, which means that's where the treasure is.
Treasure
I
gold.
mean, if you look at that and read it, I mean, the hair on your
But we don't know
arms
what
curl.
it was,
But we don't know what it was.
or where they're, what house
You
they're
know,
talking
but
about, or
and
anything.
it's written in Spanish, handwritten on the bottom of that drawer.
And it's in the house too, if you want.
Yeah,
to.
so I even got
Like a
a
picture of that.
I even got a map of the town of Palomas, and I was trying to figure out where the house was. So I could go up there and dig.
So Needless to say, we've never found the
We
treasure.
never found, so we're not reaching up.
But isn't it amazing how you can get these wonderful directions, but then they don't tell you where to
They
look?
don't, no, they don't tell you where to go.
See, I even asked my aunt.
And she didn't know
So,
either.
Where was the house? Well, I don't remember. It's over here somewhere. I said, but just think all the money that's buried there.
Or
I know about
whatever.
there, but it's really bizarre and it's kind of scary,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, how they're talking back to you through the
Through that,
images.
those messages,
Those
yeah.
messages.
Mhm.
Now, tell me, was Ash Balls going into town? Was Ash Balls up on the curve,
No.
or is that a different bar? That was the Palomas bar.
Right down here. No, that used to be the Palomas bar. Yes.
Okay. Now, who owned the Palomas bar?
God, I can remember, Sherry. There used to be two bars here when I was a kid. There used to be the Palomas bar. There was another called the Valley Inn Bar.
Valley
The
Inn.
Valley Inn Bar is just north of Old Raxdale Lumberyard. There's it's still there. They used to call it was called the Valley Inn Bar. The Palomas Bar, I can't remember who had that bar, because I remember we used to go in there.
Which one did Mrs. Ashball have?
That was what I thought Mrs. Ashball had that one before they moved it into town.
They
I
had-
did too, I
No,
thought so
the
too.
Ashbills had one down here in Palomas.
Oh, in Old
Oh,
Palomas?
it was an old
Yeah,
Palomas.
one of the dance halls that they owned was down there.
Is that
That's
what
where
it was?
that's where the Ashbills originated in
Oh,
Palomas.
okay.
Was in Palomas.
Yes, and then from there they went up there and they built that one across the street from that plaza there, where
The Sierra.
Yes,
Sierra
Sierra
Club.
Plaza.
Yeah.
that was Ashballs, and then they built the Silver Slipper, which the Ashbill was one of both
And
of those.
Ashball built
Yes.
Silver Slipper as well.
Yes.
And later then, when it was owned, and I forget who owned it, but it was, I'll think of her name, but it was, then this branding iron. And now it's just like a junk store there.
Yeah.
But that's really,
The Casayas owned that there. Claude Casaya bought that from the Ashballs back
that's it.
30 years ago.
Kasaya, yeah.
Because Emery Ashball had it, and then he had this farm up here, and then Claude Casaya bought the Silver Slipper. Well, what they did is Claude Casaya traded Ashball the Silver Slipper for this farm up here, and then from there on, I don't know what happened to the bar from Casaya. He sold it. I think he sold a liquor license. Then that's when what's her name? She used to be Clark. They have that second-hand store there.
Yeah.
Mary
Mary Graves. It was Mary Graves.
Yeah.
Mary
Yeah,
Graves.
Mary
Yeah,
Graves,
but
yeah.
her maiden name was Clark.
Mary Clark
Right,
Graves,
yeah.
but now it's something else.
Yeah, another thing too, Mary Clark, her parents used to live up Palomas here too. They used to have a goat farm. They used to sell goat milk.
Now, did your family do you remember anything during the Depression about the goats and the sheep and all the huge herds they had? Were they cattle, or were they wheat, or did they farm?
Well, my mother's family had a ranch 18 miles, east of here, west of
Well,
here.
they used to own right there
And
where
they had goats,
where
or
Mud Mountain is.
they had
Her
goats.
her grandfather used to own that, and he used to raise goats up there in
Yeah,
Mud
they
Mountain.
raised
Mud
goats.
And then from there they went up there to this, it's called La Salada, which is a salty, and they had a bunch of goats.
Yeah, they
over
raised
there,
goats.
And
I
then
think-
pardon?
Oh, I was just thinking that at one time I found a goat bell up there, and I figured that had to have been
Yeah,
an area where
they
goats had
did.
been.
They raised goats.
Did they stay out with the goats did they camp
No.
out with the goats?
Well, my mother remembers, because see, they don't have potable water out there. There was just one place on the ranch, and it borders the Ladder Ranch. And they had one well that was potable, so my mother had to take water to where they lived on her shoulders with whatever they call them, with the buckets. But then in later years, they did away with the goats and went to cattle. But it started as goats.
Very interesting. And your family, the Armijos, were they ever involved in goats and sheep?
Mostly, the Armijos mostly just, they just farmed.
Wow.
And they had cattle, we had cattle down there at the river. And it was mostly, then my uncle over here, when he developed this land in the 40s, he used to raise cotton, chili, corn, all kinds of vegetables. And then my dad raised alfalfa at the other farm.
And then you raised alfalfa to just this year.
And then he had a garden. But then I raised alfalfa here since about '66 till about January.
How many crops of alfalfa did you cut a year?
5.
And did you ever get more than 5, or was it always pretty much 5?
5 and a clipping maybe, but it was mostly 5 because you used to cut around about the first part of May. We got May, June, July, August, and September. Sometimes in October or November, depending on the climate, weather, and if you're lucky enough to get it up before you got rained on.
Now, when you talk about the garden, how did they, did they have a root cellar? Did they put their food in? How did they have dry chili? Was it dry red? Did they have dry green? Tell us about, as you recollect, what it was like when they were storing their food and preparing for
They used to dehydrate the chili, sun dry it, okay, on the top of the rooftops. And then from there, they'd bag it in bags and hang it up to dry. But then my aunt would actually get green chili. It's called a chile pasado, which is past chili. She used to get it, peel it, and hang it on the fence, barbed wire fence, let it dry, and then from there you take it up and you bag it. And so they used to do the same thing with jerky.
Yeah. But she used to do a lot of canning.
Yes.
A lot of vegetables she would can.
Make her own soap. Remember when I was a kid, they used to make soap.
And she used to churn her own butter. In fact, we've got the little butter churn up on the top that she used to, that glass one. And I saw that when she used to do that. She used to make cottage cheese out when they used to milk a cow, because Walter was raised on cow milk, that they used to milk. But that's, yeah.
We had everything here. We had chickens, raised everything.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we still have a matanza once a year that we have lots of people in January. Is when we hold it.
You put it in the ground and do it the old
No, what we usually do is, I used to go ahead and purchase, we used to raise our own pig for babies all the way up, and then we used to butcher them. And then I got to a point where it's cheaper just to go ahead and buy them. Well, I'd go ahead and buy them and then raise them. I used to get these 4-H pigs and keep them for about 4 or 5 months and raise them, get them nice and heavy, and then butcher them. Then the last couple of years, I've got a little water, and I call it matanza in a box. What I do is I go to the local grocery store and I have them order me about 200 pounds of green fat, and then we just cook it.
Make the chicharrones
Make the
and
chicharrones.
red chili. And in fact, the boys that this year, Walter said he wasn't going to do it. The boy said, "No, you have to, Dad." And 2 of the boys are, the little one and the middle one are really into it. So they've done it mostly and let Dad rest a little bit. But
I don't know if you ever been to one of the matanzas?
Not to yours. I mean, I've been up to Chloride.
EJ?
Nope.
Okay, well, the thing is that we usually have it on the second weekend in January.
January.
We usually have anywhere between 150 and 200 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
We have all walks of life. We have judges, we have politicians, we have
judges,
teachers, we have
priests,
judges,
pastors.
we have law enforcement, anybody that wants to come. We had people that came all the way from Puerto Peñasco, Mexico.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's our gift to the community,
And,
for once a year.
And we have a really good time.
But we have a good time.
It's really neat, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but one of the highlights of the matanza is white lightning that's brought in. I mean, there's a friend of mine that brings it from Virginia, and he brings a small jug, and I mean, it is out of this world. And that's one of the highlights of the matanza is everybody's looking forward to taste that white lightning. He makes it with cherry or an apple, cherry, peaches,
Wow.
and it's really, really good.
Now, tell us the recipe. I know Ann Wilbur would want this because she's always interested in the chicharrones.
Oh.
Walk us through a recipe of that.
Well, actually, this is not a recipe. It's just what you do is you get your green fat, which is the back part of the pig. So can I explain a little bit of the process of the pig? Okay. Actually, your pig has 3 different layers or different kinds of fat. Okay. You've got the internal fat. You've got the fat that's around the intestines, and you have the back fat, and that's usually where they make their bacon is from the back fat. Okay. And this is an art that's not being done anymore. And the only time we do this, whenever you raise your pig, is a lot of people think it's gross until they eat it. Okay, is we butcher our pig, And then I usually take the inside fat, which looks like a spider web, which actually holds the intestines and everything else. You take it off and clean it real good. And there's this little strip of fat that holds the little intestines together. And you get that particular piece of fat, and once you wash it and everything, and then you cut it up. And when you're frying it, deep frying it, it looks like a shrimp. I mean, it has the same texture. I mean, if you got shrimp and you got this fat, put it together, you can tell the difference. And what you do is you fry it, and we have these big fats called jarrillas, and they're cast iron. And I've got them from anywhere from 6 inches all the way up to 4 foot in diameter. And what we do is we get all that fat. Well, let me back up. The fat that we use to make this, we call it the guiso. And we get that because it's not very much, and it's a delicacy because there's not that much of it. And we fry that in a small bowl, and then after that, then we go into the back fat. And we usually cut it in cube in about 2-inch cubes, and then we just put it in a big cast iron vat. And you just sit there and stir it, make sure it doesn't stick, and you just cook it for about 2.5 hours. And what happens is you use that salt, because we've tried everything. We've tried baking soda, beer. The best thing is just plain salt. Salt and constant heat. And back then we used to do it with wood. Now I've been using propane, which is you can control it better and it cooks a lot better. It takes about 2 hours to make 160 pounds, 200 pounds of chicharrones. And you just cook them and just watch them. And what they'll do, as they cook, they start to rise. And then when they get to a certain temperature or elevation, then you just maybe turn your heat up a little bit, and what it does, it gets them hot enough where they start to pop. And once they start to pop, they'll raise they look like, and they'll float to the surface, and they'll turn brown. And the thing is, whenever they get that color, you can actually tell by the smoke, because if you can see as a grease or lard is hot, it puts out like a little cloud, and if that cloud gets blue, we're burned. It only takes about 5 minutes or 5 seconds. Then you take them out and let them cool, and then you eat them. We've made some, anywhere from ½ inch all the way to 2 inches and 3 inches in diameter. And I'm kind of proud because the kids last year, they made some that even if you had...
They were the best we've ever had, I think.
I mean, I hate to say it, but if you had like dentures, you could eat them with dentures. They were that soft.
Wow.
They were good.
That's
Really
wonderful.
And the two boys did it this year.
And then
And then what we do is the corn tortillas too, but we don't do it anymore.
Well, we used to grow our own corn, grind our own
Wow.
corn called nixtamal, and make the own corn tortillas by hand.
And Walter would do the corn, grind the corn, and then he would do the masa for me, and then we'd both do the tortillas, and I would make them or he would make them, and then we'd take turns cooking or whatever, but that's gone too. Now we buy them.
Ground from Albuquerque, but
Albuquerque brand.
it's we still do it. It's the kids that finally learn that trade, and it's great.
So we're hoping it's not lost, because they two our oldest is an office kind of person, and not really a farmer, but the other two, they do. I think they'll take over,
Carry on the
tradition of the
traditions.
matanzas or whatever.
We started out as real funny, but remember I guess we've only been doing enough for about 15 years, huh?
The
20 years?
matanza?
Yeah. And we started out with, we used to do it every 3 or 4 years. We started out, we had one, and all of a sudden all these kids are coming up.
Yeah.
Our boys invited their kids. There must have been 50 high school kids or young kids. And I told Viola, says, where did these kids come from? So they had a good time. So the following year we went ahead and bought 2. And that's where everybody got together, and that's where it all started. We enjoyed. There's another place in I believe in Midland that they have. There's a guy that does it commercially, and he usually butchers about 10 or 15 pigs. And they have a big matanza. Something, but he sells his stuff. About 2,000 or 3,000 people that attend that.
Wow.
But we just do it, and the thing is, all the natives from here used to have the matanzas, and every year, one butcher one month or whatever, everybody got together. It's a lost art. You don't see it anymore.
And don't you think that's because so often we're, like you were talking earlier, your family, they stay in the valley, they probably, if they move, they might move up the valley like a half a mile or a mile and a half. But I mean, they cooked here, they grew their gardens, they lived here, and they didn't spread. Now our families and our generations are so spread out that we lose a lot of our traditions.
Right. Yeah, see, it was just my sister and I, there's only two siblings in the family, and she lives about 3 miles from here. And they do it also, they haven't went down south. And our middle boy, Eric, he lives here, he graduated school was for me. And then Ronald, which is the oldest one, he's in Albuquerque. And then Mark, the youngest one, lives in Las Cruces, but he does the custom-built motorcycles. So they're all scattered. We're kind of hoping one would be living like in Alaska, in Florida, so we can actually travel, right? I mean, we're within Rockville now.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we want to thank you for this interview. We're going to go ahead now and take a tour of some of the things that we've talked about. So, thank you, audience. Thanks, Viola and Walter. We
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Sherry. Enjoyed it.
We've waited for about, what, a year?
Yeah, keep it working on this. We got the good thing nobody died in the interim. So